Hello. I'd like to thank everybody for coming to today's lecture. I'm going to read some introductory remarks and introduce our fabulous speaker, Raquel Levy-Toledano. There will probably be more registered participants who are coming in as I'm talking, which is totally fine. I also have to apologize in advance because there's some words in French in Raquel's biography, and French is not my language. I can speak it a tiny, tiny bit. So I apologize in advance if I mispronounce any of the French words while I'm reading to you. And I just want to make sure you can hear me, right, Raquel? Awesome. So I'm assuming everybody else can too, and I will read my introductory remarks. I always like to check. Okay. So hello and welcome to the Center for Jewish History, albeit virtually. I'm delighted that you're all here for this month's Family History Today lecture, which is a Moroccan Jewish genealogical journey. My name is Jenny Rappaport, and I'm the head genealogist at the Ackman and Ziff Family Genealogy Institute. I have a few short remarks before I introduce Raquel. So the Center for Jewish History provides a collaborative home for 5 in-house partner organizations, which together form the largest archive on the modern Jewish experience outside of Israel. In addition, the center houses the Ackman and Ziff Family Genealogy Institute, where we assist people, whether Jewish or non-Jewish, with researching their family history. Because time is of the essence, the Genealogy Institute has recently shifted our focus to helping Holocaust survivors and their direct descendants, in the hope that solving questions about their families can bring healing and closure. Our definition of a Holocaust survivor is very broad and encompasses anyone who experienced persecution under the Nazi regime from 1933 to 1945, regardless of religion, including refugees, people in hiding, and those who were incarcerated in concentration camps. If you are a Holocaust survivor, or the direct descendant of a Holocaust survivor, so the child or grandchild of one, we encourage you to make an appointment with the Genealogy Institute by emailing gia@cjh.org. We remain open to the general public on Mondays from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., when our experienced genealogy staff is happy to assist researchers of all experience levels with their research. No appointments are needed on Mondays. Any questions and comments during this program can be submitted at any time by using the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. Please note that our guest speaker will only answer your questions during the dedicated Q&A portion at the end of this program. If you'd like to view the closed captions for this program, please click on the closed caption button on the bottom of your screen and then click Show Subtitles. This program will be recorded. Please note that we correct the auto captions for all of our program videos, so it typically takes us about 2 to 3 weeks or so to post them online. Once the video is online, you'll receive an email with a link to watch it. Oh, more people have signed in since I looked at the Zoom. And now finally, I get the wonderful pleasure of introducing today's speaker, Raquel Levy-Toledano. Raquel Levy-Toledano was born in Morocco, then moved to France, where she earned her MD in gynecology and PhD in molecular endocrinology, followed by postdoctoral training at the National Institute of Health in Maryland. She is a board member of IAJGS, which is the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies, a board member of the Cercle de Généalogie Juive, where she manages the Genetic Genealogy Group, a member of the General Assembly of the International Institute for Jewish Genealogy in Israel, the president of NAJMA, which is Nos Ancestres Juifs Morocans et Algériens Genealogical Society, an expert curator of Jeannie's Moroccan and Algerian Jewish family tree, the co-administrator of the Avotenu DNA Project section involving North African Jews, and the founder of the Généalogie des Juifs Marocains Facebook group, which has 13,000 members. She has published several articles in Genealogy and other journals, and has presented at numerous conferences and Zoom meetings. And it's all yours, Raquel. I'm going to mute myself and let you share your screen.
Okay, thank you very much, Jenny, for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me to give this lecture. I'm very pleased and very, very honored for that. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening if, like me, you are in Europe or in Israel. And I'm very pleased to take you through my Moroccan Jewish genealogical journey. This journey started by this simple question: Did you know that our Levy great-grandfather was born in Manchester? I didn't know that, and actually I didn't know anything about my Levy family, apart from my grandfather and his two brothers, and I knew their mother was Mesoda Ohayon Levy, and her brother Nassim Ohayon had raised my grandfather Nassim Levy, so that let me think that my great-grandfather had died when he was a kid. So of him, I didn't know anything. And I started to search. But before that, I'd like to tell you a few words about Mogador, or Essaouira, as it is called now. Mogador is a city today on the Atlantic coast of Morocco, and it used to be a Portuguese fortress. It was built in 1760 by Mohammed ibn Abdallah, who wanted to have the biggest seaport on the Atlantic coast, and especially in North Africa. And he also built a city to accommodate foreign travelers and traders. And from there, he developed the international trade, and he brought in 10 families, Jewish families from the Marrakesh or from Agadir, from the south, that became the Tajer as Sultan, Tajer meaning in Arabic, rich. From there was an intense trading with England and especially with Manchester. So I was not that surprised. Of course, I was surprised, but it was not that surprising that someone from Mogador was born in Manchester. This is just to show you a street of the Mellah being the Jewish quarter of Mogador. This was probably taken at the beginning of the 20th century. And as you can see, the city was extremely crowded, the streets were crowded, and there were small shops on the side here. And I really could imagine that my ancestors were perhaps craftsmen working in these shops. But actually in Mogador, there were another kind of people. And as you can see, they are dressed like Victorian British people. And actually they lived as Victorian British people. And those were the Tajer Sultan family. So this is a Korkos family, and this is the Afriat family. Oops. So who was my great-grandfather born in Manchester, and who was I looking for? My father's name is Meyer, and he is the eldest son of Nessim, my grandfather. His first cousin, who was also the eldest son of his father, was also named Meyer. So I suspected that my great-grandfather's first name was Meyer. So I was looking for a Meyer Levy. Abraham, being the older of his two brothers, I thought that Abraham could be the name of the father of Meyer Levy could be Abraham. So I was looking for Meyer, son of Abraham Levy, born in Manchester between 1845 and 1865. I started to dig in the UK archives, and I found a wealth of information in the UK censuses, especially those focused on Manchester, in all the historical directories that are online, whether it was people, street, or business directories, on the online archives of several journals, especially on the Jewish Chronicle, and on all kind of register, whether it was marriage or death registration index of wills and probate, South American journals and directories, and you'll see later why it was important, and all the online family trees that I could find. And my first encounter with Meyer Levy was in the census of 1861, and there I found Meyer, son of Abraham, here, and son of Rachel, living in Manchester. And Meyer was born probably around 1853, because he was 8 in 1861. And the family was living what looked like to me a poor neighborhood. Thanks to all the archives that I could consult, I could witness the social rise of Abraham Levy's family. Abraham was born in Poland in 1811, and he probably arrived in Manchester between 1850 and 1853, because Jacob, the youngest brother next to Meyer, was born in 1850 in Poland. Abraham was a salesman in 1861, and then he became a French merchant with 2 business addresses. And I could see that he was kind of big figure in Manchester, in the Jewish community of Manchester. He became the treasurer of the Manchester Hebrew congregation. He was a member of several committees, including education committees, burial committees. He made, he and his son made several donations to funds to the Great Synagogue of Manchester, and they were members of several social clubs. And so I could tell that he has been quite successful in his life, and this was confirmed by his will and by his wife's wills. This is a page of the business directory of Manchester of 1879, and you can see that Abraham had 2 business addresses, and on the same page we could see that Meyer and his brother Joseph were working as fence dealer for their father Abraham. What we could see, what I could find also in one of the directory, and this was in 1883, is that the business of that Abraham and his son were having business with foreign countries, especially Canada and South Africa. So that would have given Meyer the opportunity to travel, and perhaps to travel to Morocco and to meet my great-grandmother. In the archives of South Africa, I found also Benjamin Levy, the first mayor of Aliwal North in South Africa. And Benjamin was the brother of Meyer Levy. After Benjamin resigned, the mayorship was taken over by his brother Joseph, and both were the first 2 mayors of Aliwal North. And actually, today there is a very large neighborhood in Aliwal North called the Levy neighborhood, and probably that it was called that way in memory of the 2 mayors, the 2 first mayors of Aliwal North, who were the Levy brothers. But let's go back to Meyer. Meyer married Frances Mansfield in September 1886 in London. I could find the family in 1891 census of Manchester, and there I found Meyer, his wife, and his children, so with Frances. But what I saw is that he was a cotton merchant, and next to his occupation, it was written foreign home. So I don't know whether that home was a foreign to Meyer, or if he lived elsewhere. But in any case, that was the first hint that maybe Meyer and Frances or Meyer lived somewhere else. In 1895, he's listed as a draper in another street, another address in Broughton. In the London Gazette of 1895, I could see that Meyer and Joseph were partners in Aliwal North, so that confirmed that Meyer had gone to South Africa several times and might have gone through Morocco or Mogador or stopped there. In the 901 census, I found Frances living in Manchester, again at another address. She was there living with her children. And what it says is that she was living on her own means, as if she and Meyer were separated. In the same census, I found Meyer living in Ley, but there he is listed as a boarder in a surgeon house. So I don't know whether he was sick and got treated in that house, or if he had an accident on his way home and was in that house, or if this was his permanent residence. But in any case, he died a few days after this census was taken in Ley in April 10th. I should say also that this house was located in the railway road in Ley, so very close to the railway station. So that made me think that perhaps he was traveling. What was surprising is that the death notice of Meyer was made only by his mother, Rachel, the widow of Abraham Levy. And likewise, the notice that she published a year after his death was also only on her name. And I don't know how it is in United States, but in Morocco and in France, when you publish a death notice, you mention, of course, the parents, but also the wife or the husband and the children. So this led me think that perhaps Frances was not considered as fully part of the family. But in any case, she published a legal notice in the London Gazette shortly after Meyer's death, and she asked for any person having a claim against the estate of Meyer Levy to make themselves known before the 24th of June 1901, so in a very short notice, in only 2 months. In a way that if Meyer had a family elsewhere, especially in Morocco, they wouldn't be aware that he had died, that he had passed away, and they could not make themselves known. So in a way, it was, I felt as if she was aware that he had a family elsewhere, and she didn't give them enough notice, as if she wanted to spoil or steal their inheritance. I was lucky because when I looked for a family tree, I found a family tree of Meyer. Actually, it was the family tree of his sister Elena. And I could talk to Elena's great-granddaughter. She was very nice and she listened to me very carefully. And I could tell that she found my story plausible. And she was not aware that Meyer had a second family elsewhere. And she told me that if he had, he would never have told his parents because that would have taken him off the will of his parents being Orthodox Jews. But what she told me is that her father, Anthony Mayers, that passed away a few months after I talked to her, I talked to her, had a DNA test when he was alive, and she advised me to take a DNA test. So I ran into the internet, I rushed into the internet, I bought myself a DNA test, and I tested myself. And boom, I didn't have any DNA segment in common with Anthony. So that is very less likely if he is my third, he should have been my second cousin once removed. But I thought that maybe with my Uncle Joseph, so I didn't give up. And I asked my Uncle Joseph to test himself because I was really convinced that that Meyer Levy was my great-grandfather, and I was very happy with the family, etc. So I didn't want to give up. And my Uncle Joseph tested himself, and again, no DNA in common. So I just found my great-grandfather Meyer Levy through paper trail, and here I'm losing him through genetic genealogy. So talking about DNA and genetic, I just wanted to make a point here that what we test when we take a recreational test of DNA is the autosomal DNA that allow you to find genetic cousin. You may know or may not know how you are related to them, but you share DNA with them. You can also test your Y chromosome if you are a man, or if you are a woman, your brother or your father or nephew Y chromosome, to trace your patrilineal line, meaning the father of your father, etc. And you can test likewise the mitochondrial DNA to trace your matrilineal line. What the autosomal test give you as information is how close you are with someone with whom you share some DNA, but it doesn't tell you who is the ancestor that you have in common. The second thing that it can, the second type of information that it can give you is to identify individuals that share the same ancestor, but what we call triangulation. So triangulation is a DNA segment that are inherited from a common ancestor, and that is shared by 3 or more genetic cousins. So if I'm telling you that, it's because I'm going to use triangulation in my search, in my genealogical search. So, who was Meyer Levy, my great-grandfather? I thought that it was so easy to find him in Manchester that it should be that easy to find him in Morocco, but obviously he was born in Manchester, most probably, but he was probably of Moroccan Jewish descent. And so I looked everywhere, tried to find document, tried to find family trees, etc., and I didn't find anything. So as I started, I investigated in my Levy family. I thought, okay, let's investigate and try to identify my ancestor on my mother's side. And so I tested my aunt, Yvonne Zrien, my late aunt Yvonne Zrien. And there I found that both my Uncle Joseph, my Aunt Yvonne, and myself had shared some DNA, and that we both triangulated. So we probably had a common ancestor. I asked my aunt and whether my parents were related, because I knew my parents met randomly, they fell in love, they married, but I didn't know they were related. And then she told me, oh, now that you ask me, they were probably related through the Levy family. And she told me that her grandmother was Halia Levy, daughter of Mimoun Levy, and that most probably Mimoun was related to one of the ancestors of my father. And considering the DNA connection and the DNA, the amount of DNA we shared and the triangulation, I thought that maybe Mimoun was Meyer's Levy brother. So I could not find, and I didn't know who was my great-grandfather Meyer Levy, but I could tell that he was probably the brother of my maternal second great-grandfather. Until I found this circumcision register from the Morel, Juda Bandan. I found it in the Spanish and Portuguese congregation at Bevismark. That's where it was stored. I know it has been displaced now. And what I found there, of course, sorry. I found my grandfather Nassim, his brother Abraham, and the date of birth were correct. And they were both the son of Meyer Levy Belfsahi. So I was right about the name Meyer. But Belfsahi, I've never heard about. And you would agree with me that it doesn't sound very Manchesterian, I would say. And I asked everyone in my family, we didn't know that our name was Belfsahi, but it was not surprising because in Mogador, there were few Levy families and they all carried two names. There were the Levy Ben Soussan, the Levy Ben Hamou, the Levy Demnati, the Levy Yuli, the Levy Korkos, and here my family was Levy Belfsahi. So I looked into the meaning of Belfsahi. Actually, it's an Arabic word, and it means someone who is kind of well-dressed, who behave well. So I could live with that name. It was not too bad. In the same register, I found several Levy Belfsahi that looked like being a single family. I found Abraham and Nassim, my grandfather and his brother, being the son of Meyer, but I also found Meyer and Mimoun. So indeed, Mimoun was probably the brother of Meyer. And I found two other brothers, David and Simon. This method, the last method here, is probably the same as this one here, who was born in 1876, and he named his son Meyer. So it's probably Meyer's son. I would call him Meyer Senior's son. So from this register, I built family tree with all the information I could get there. And I also added my father, Meyer, son of Nassim, and his first cousin, Meyer, son of Abraham. And you can see that they were all named Meyer, and they were all firstborn. So indeed, my great-grandfather's name was Meyer Levy, and he probably died before 1898, because in my family, and like other families in Morocco, we don't name a child after a person that is alive. So if this Meyer here, born in 1898, was called Meyer, it's probably because his grandfather was already dead, had already died. And the other thing is that by looking in this register, I could see that there were two Mesad Levy. And actually there is a third Mesad Levy, grandson of the father of Meyer. So that probably my second great-grandfather was named Mesad. And probably he died in 1871, because this Salomon Levy was born in May 71, and he was not named Mesad. And the first Mesad was born in November 71. So probably that my second great-grandfather was born between May and November 1871. And that was another breakthrough in my brick wall, as we say in genealogy. I had a DNA match with Alain, with whom I didn't know how I was related, but what I saw is that he had a very strong match with my Uncle Joseph. and a strong match with my Aunt Yvonne. And the three of them triangulated on a single segment that is quite large, within 30 centimorgan. I also saw on my heritage that Alain had a family tree, that his great-grandfather was David Levy, so probably the last son I mentioned in the previous family tree I showed you, and that his grandfather was named Mesod Levy. So most probably we were related, Alain and myself, through the Levy Belfsahi family, but for me this did not really constitute a proof until his first cousin told him that indeed their name in Mogador was Levy Belfsahi. So then I was convinced that Alain was probably my third or fourth cousin. So I continue building the family tree of the descendant of Mesod Levy Belfsahi. I added Alain's family and also his great aunt, because she married Isaac Levy, my great uncle, and from there I got also a lot of information on the family, on the Levy Belfsahi family. The other information I got is that there was a fifth son of Mesod called Baruch, and her daughter Mazal had married her first cousin Abraham. And I also learned that from Alain that Isaac, Abraham, and Nessim, my grandfather and his brother, had a half-sister called Esther, whose son was named also Meyer. I continue digging into the DNA, etc. Of course, I put myself in the tree with Alia, my great-grandmother, Alia Levy, being the daughter of Mimoun Levy. And I could add another, a sister to Alia, who turned out to be her twin sister, and whose descendant I could find through DNA. And there I was building the family tree. Today we are probably a few hundred descendants of Mesod Levy. I know most of them. A lot of them did a DNA test, and I could prove with triangulation, etc., all the link that we have together. Then one day I was looking into this book, The Merchant of Essaouira, and what I found is my Mesod Levy, my great-grandfather, no, my second great-grandfather, mentioned there that he did an agreement with David Ben Jacob Korkos, and that he was the son of David Alewi. David Alewi, so David Levy, and that fit also with the family tree, since Mesod had a son called David. So I could add my third great-grandfather. So I started without knowing who was my great-grandfather, and I am ending up with having identified at least three of my great-grandfather, Meir Levy, Mesod, his father, and David, his grandfather. A few months ago, actually about a year and a half ago, I was contacted by a man from Cape Verde named Levy, who asked me, he contacted me on Jenny, and he asked me whether I knew this family, and if I knew to whom they were related in Morocco, etc. And indeed, I've found this family in this book, Genealogical Hebraica. I've had seen it before, but I didn't know that family, and I didn't know who they were, and whether I knew they were from Mogador because it is written in the book, but I didn't know whether we were related until one of the descendants of this family, that I will call the Miss Montero Levy, did a DNA test, and we matched. So I could I started to interrogate their family, and the other thing that I did is that I put all the DNA that I had because, you'll see. So not only she was matching me, but she also strongly matched my paternal uncle. So I should say that in Ashkenazi Jews, when you share 1% or 1.2% DNA, it's not a match. It's not very much, but in Moroccan Jews and in Sephardic Jews, it starts to be a lot. And see, for instance, here she matches my uncle, and she's her third cousin. And most importantly, she shared with him and with me quite a large DNA segment. But the other thing is that she triangulated with some of my first cousin from the Levy side and some of my second cousin, including Alain. This is my first cousin, and this is my second cousin, and of course with my with Joseph. She didn't triangulate. I didn't triangulate with them. I didn't inherited this segment. So most probably we shared an ancestor, Mrs. Montero Levy and my family, and that ancestor, and that we were either all descendant of Messard Levy, or she descended from a parallel branch of Messard Levy. And through DNA Painter, a software that allow you to put the DNA segment and some hypothesis and amount of DNA you share with a person, the software will locate that person on the tree. And of course, what it gives is some probabilities, but yet I could locate Mrs. Montero Levy on the tree, and that is how I could locate her. So here I am. I identified one great-grandfather, Meyer, and my second, my third, and my fourth great-grandfather. So now I could go back to Baruch. And remember, I had a Baruch that was the brother of Meyer Levy. And Baruch in Morocco is not a very common first name. So I guess that is where it came from this Baruch. I had the opportunity to go, so I had the opportunity to go to Cape Verde, and I met there the last grandson of Bento Levy, who was born in Portugal and went to Cape Verde. He married a Cape Verde woman and had the 5 sons. So I was able and had the chance to meet Abrao, who was the last grandson. Sadly, he passed away a few months ago, but I met him, and we shared. He was extremely proud of his Moroccan Jewish heritage. We shared a lot of information on our family, photographs, etc. I visited him twice in Cape Verde. And once there was a death in the family, in some friend family from Cape Verde, but while I was there, and by curiosity, I asked them what is the custom, what do they do when someone dies? And they told me, oh, when someone dies, we bury him, and then we go home. We stay home for a week. And people come and bring food to the family. They cannot cook. And so that's where I thought maybe these Moroccan Jews who married Christian women told their children what they should do when they pass away. And that remind me, of course, of the Shiva. The other thing that I should add is that there were not only this Levy family that went to Cape Verde, there were few, perhaps 10 or 15 more men, Moroccan Jews, Their descendants are very much aware of their Jewish Moroccan heritage and very proud of it. They are part of the elite of the young democracy of Cape Verde, and actually the first prime minister ever of this democracy was a descendant of Moroccan Jew. His name was Carlos Vega Wahnon. So just few words on the Y chromosome of the Levy, and to show that it was an additional proof that we indeed descended from that we had the same Levy ancestor. Both the Levy branch of my family, because there was another Levy branch, another Levy family in Cape Verde, but the Levy branch from Cape Verde and my Levy family from Mogador shared the same Y chromosome that is also shared with the Levy from Turkey, with the most recent common ancestor that was born probably about 1800 years ago. That Y chromosome matches also the Ashkenazi Levy branch, and a man from Peru whose ancestor, our common ancestor, was probably born about 600 years ago. So that tells us that this is a very ancient Levy line of Sephardic origin, and that had probably resided in Spain before coming to Morocco. So why did my great-grandfather, why was he born in Manchester? So let me tell you a few words about a bombardment that occurred in Mogador in 1844. This was done by the French Navy in retaliation of Moroccan support to Algeria. This bombardment destroyed the whole Jewish quarters. This destruction was followed by a very long and cruel pogrom to the Jews for 40 days by the Paysan and some Berber tribes around. And the Jews had to flee Mogador, either when they had some foreign acquaintance, they went abroad, or to their family in other cities, especially in Marrakesh. So as a result, I guess, that is why my great-grandfather Meyer was born in Manchester, and that his father stayed in Manchester for some time. Actually, my great-grandmother, Deborah Morjosé, and this we know that in the family, she was born in Portugal, and her father, Salomon, has probably fled Morocco at the time of the bombardment or after the bombardment. On my maternal side, my great-grandfather, Aaron Zafrani, I don't know if he was born in the Azores, but I know that his parents, Isaac and Mazal, lived in the Azores at the time of the bombardment, actually a little bit before. And here, Mimoun Levy, this is not related to the bombardment, but what we know is that he left Morocco at the end of the 19th century. He went to Brazil and he never came back. So here I am with all my ancestors, most of them having lived outside Morocco, while I thought that they were all from Morocco, and some craftsmen in Mela, in Mogador, or in Marrakesh. So you notice that I didn't show you a lot of document of the Moroccan part. And indeed, there is a lack of document and resources, and that's why we have to rely on the family history and on the family memory. But there is one document that is very important, that is the family ketubah. The ketubah is the marriage contract, and there you can find, of course, the bride and the groom, the date of the wedding, the name of the fathers of the bride and the groom, and fortunately not the name of the mothers. There are some online resources, essentially the Israeli Genealogical Research Association, IGRA. Montefiore censuses could be very helpful. Montefiore conducted 5 censuses in the land of Israel between 1839 and 1875. And there were each time there were thousands of Moroccan Jews that emigrated to Israel in the 19th century, and you can find them there, their family, their wife, their children, the date of birth, when they arrived, etc. So it can constitute a very a very good information on for Moroccan genealogy. Le Cercle de Généalogie Juive in Paris has probably the largest database of Sephardic document, not very much for Moroccan, although there are some, mostly for Tunisian Jews. There are some ketubot in the National Library in Israel that can be found. The Gibraltar archives are very exhaustive and very complete. So if you had the chance of having an ancestor that had lived in Gibraltar or that was born there, you can find quite some document. Lately, that was a family project. Some of the Tangier archives in the north of Morocco were indexed and digitalized. There is an online Moroccan museum that is run by Paul Daon in Brussels, and there you can find also some document and mostly photographs or photographies or document telling the history of Moroccan Jews. Of course, there is the Jewish Gen Sephardic database. There is an ongoing project that is called Yachasra, where we try to list all the Jewish tombs in Morocco that we can find. Amsterdam archives, if you had the chance of having an ancestor that had lived there, and there were some Moroccan, it can be very useful, as are Portugal archives. And of course, there is another very precious database that is the French Algerian Civil State Archives called the ANOM. But that's if one of your ancestors had lived in Algeria, and of course, all the family trees. A few books, the Genealogia Hebraica I just told you about, Une histoire de famille, so a history of family from Joseph Toledano, mostly from Meknes, while the Genealogia Hebraica is mostly for Jews that lived in Portugal and in the Azores. 2 very good onomasty books. Les noms des Juifs du Maroc in French, the name of the Moroccan Jews, from Abraham Laredo, and a book from the expert Alexander Bader, a dictionary of Jewish surname from Morocco, Gibraltar, and Malta. And finally, a book that came out very lately, called the Book of Mogador in Hebrew, and written by Sidney Korkos, so that one is only on Mogador. So, in conclusion, there is a major lack of document, and this highlights the importance of the family memory and history in Moroccan Jewish genealogy. And also what I've showed how I used the genetic genealogy to refute the hypothetical family history and to confirm hypothesis. So, sorry, thank you very much for accompanying me in this journey, and I hope you liked it.
Thank you so much, Raquel. I can read the questions because we've got a couple of questions for you, some of which overlap, some which don't, and they have lots of questions. Natalie started us off and wanted to know about the Afriat family, which is spelled Riat. She says she has cousins who are Afriats.
Okay.
I think it's
What I
in
can
reference
tell,
to they lived in Mogador, perhaps you had mentioned.
yes, yes. So if Natalie reads Hebrew, the book of Sidney Korkos, who is a descendant of the Afriat family from his mother, she learned a lot. But the Afriat family came probably from the south of Morocco, and they came in 1879 at the request of the king and was one of the Tajer Sultan family. So very wealthy family.
It's fascinating. We have a question from Lisa who says that and actually this dovetails with a question down below from genealogicalstudies.com. Hi, I don't have a name for you. And so they both wanted to know, so genealogicalstudies.com asks, are there Moroccan Jews who have a tradition of naming after living grandparents? And Lisa says that her husband's Moroccan Jewish family does indeed name children for living elders. And so the question is, and actually this is my question too, because as far as I understood from a genealogical perspective, Ashkenazi Jews only name after the dead, and Sephardic Jews, I was told, and I'm not of Sephardic descent, only name after the living. So if you could explain that a little bit more, I think that would be marvelous.
Actually, you're right. In Morocco, they generally name children during the living. Okay. And in my family, they don't. And actually, that was another hint that made me think that my great-grandfather could have been Ashkenazi, because the way my father used to wear the tefillin was on the Ashkenazi way. The way we put the mezuzah on our door in Morocco was not like the others. And I never knew where it came from. And that also made me think that maybe my great-grandfather was Ashkenazi, but as you know, he was not. But yes, you're right.
I think it's fascinating. And to get to the second, oh geez, 1 minute, let me mute this. I have to shut that. We have a governor election in my house, in my state.
Okay, perhaps I will read the questions. Oh, what is a fant dealer? Okay, actually, I think it's an old.
Hi, sorry about that. I do apologize.
That's fine. I think a fan dealer is an old occupation, and that they were dealing with cotton, perhaps with old rag. I don't know, because I could not find the meaning of that word, a corresponding occupation today. But they were mostly dealing with cotton and fabric. And as you may know, Manchester was at that time the capital of the cotton industry.
I wanted to, what I was saying before, I do apologize. The phone rang. I wanted to know, on behalf of Lisa, who had asked, she wanted to know about what documentation might be available in Morocco through the late 1950s. Her husband's family have the common name, she says, of Ben Shoshan, and I assume from her question that she's had trouble finding some documents.
There are a few books, and there is a very famous Bensoussan living in Canada, David Bensoussan, who has been very interested in his family. And my guess is that he had written one book on his family. So it's David Bensoussan living in Quebec, in Montreal, in Quebec, in Canada. Yeah, Bensoussan is a very large family in Morocco. So it's like the Levy, although I was very lucky to find my own family. But when there is a common name, such as Bensoussan or Biton or Hayon, etc., it's quite difficult to dig into the document, etc. Unless she has an ancestor, or her husband has an ancestor that was a rabbi, and whose ancestor had written books, because very often, and when a rabbi wrote a book, he used to speak about his family, if not put a family tree in his book. And that's in what happened also for the Toledanos. So for the Toledanos, we can go back 14 generations because it was a rabbi lineage.
That's fascinating. iPhone 2, hello iPhone 2, would like to know whether the history of Tunisian Jews is similar to Moroccan ones.
Not exactly. In Morocco, so very briefly, in Morocco, there were two waves of immigration. The first one was at the start of the first millennia, after the destruction of the Second Temple or after the Bar Kokhba revolt. And Jews arrived in Morocco and stayed there, and those are called the Toshavim, the resident people that had been in Morocco for a long, long time. And then there is a second wave of immigration. Actually, there are a few waves, but mostly, let's say, at the end of the 14th century and at the end of the 15th century, so in 1391 and 1492, after the Alhambra decree, and the Jews were expelled from Spain, and a lot of them came to Morocco. In Tunisia, it's not exactly the same. A lot of Tunisians are autochthonous. I would call them autochthonous Jews, but they arrived from the Middle East after the destruction of the temple, and a little bit less came from Livorno, from Italy. But these Jews first came from Spain to Livorno, and from Livorno, where they had stayed a few decades, even a century, and from Livorno came to Morocco.
The next one we have is from Monique, who would like to know if you have suggestions for descendants of Moroccan Jews who moved to Algeria, and then from Algeria they then moved to Egypt, which she says is impossible to find records, I can imagine.
Okay.
The surname is Betito, probably from Meknes.
Ah, okay. There are some Betito in Gibraltar, so she should look into Gibraltar archives. And the other, as I said, it's fortunate to be born in Algeria in the 19th century, because there was a civil state and everything is online. While in Morocco, the civil state started in 1956. It started earlier with the French protectorate, but after the independence, that was implemented, and all people had to have a birth certificate, but not before. It was not mandatory.
Anonymous attendee would like to know, they say their Moroccan grandmother's maiden name was Toledano, and they would love to know where they can find information about the Toledano family.
Okay, so there is a book written by Tolly Jacob Toledano, who passed away about 3 years ago. I'm completing his work. And the problem is that that book was published in Hebrew. So if they read Hebrew, that perhaps can find this book. I don't know how it is called in Hebrew, but it's probably something like the Toledano family. And it's really, he did a great job. But the thing is that he only did the genealogy through the men, and there were some women who descended from Toledano men, as in this case, and so that's what I'm completing. I'm completing the woman's side. Hopefully this will be finished. That will be a book. And we worked together with Tolly before he passed away.
We have a question from, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Isem. Um, they say, I am from Peru, and my grandfather went from Larache to Iquitos with Abraham Toledano in 1890, more or less. This Toledano then went back to Morocco. And I think it's a similar question of how can I find more information
Okay.
about this?
Okay. So the other thing that I didn't say is that most of the Toledano tree, if anything that I knew about the Toledano was put on Jenny. So Jenny.com. And she should look at Jenny. All the work from Yaakov Tal Toledano, Toli, is in Jenny. So she should get information from there. Sorry.
Natalie had a couple of comments. One was that Fent were remnant fabrics with cuts. So that I assume goes along with the cotton. And then she also wanted to know if you could repost the slide about the books and also the slide with the genealogical links on it.
Sure, I will do that. Good suggestion. Where do I go? Here and here. So that's the online sources. And the books. But we can speak if there are other questions.
Oh, okay, yes. So there's a couple more from Natalie. One of them was posted. It says, maybe descendants of conversos on the on the maternal line. I believe that refers to the Cape Verde family that you were speaking to, and them sitting Shiva.
Okay.
Or the equivalent of what we
They
would
were
call Shiva.
very, I know them, and all my fourth cousin are Christian. And, even Abrao, when I was there on Sunday, he would ask me if I would come with him to the mass, because they are really Christian, and but yet they had this pride of being a descendant of Moroccan Jews, and I believe that the mother side was Christian, Catholic, and that they didn't, apart from the Shiva custom, they didn't keep any Jewish tradition. And actually, I should say that when I went to the cemetery in Praia, which is the Cape Verde capital located in the island of Santiago, there was a Jewish quarter with Jewish tombs from only Moroccan Jews, and in the rest of the cemetery there were a lot of tombs and with a lot of Jewish names, and not only Moroccan, but very Sephardic Jewish name. And what I believe, Cape Verde was populated by the Portuguese in 1640. Okay. And what I believe is that probably some converso went to Cape Verde from Portugal because they were not happy. They converted to Judaism. They were not to Christianity, and very often the Portuguese they were still persecuted because being previously Jewish, etc. So that could have been a way to avoid all of this by going in an island where there were no people at all.
There's a question for me here, sort of, will we receive the recording and or slides? The recording will be posted on both the YouTube channel for the Center of Jewish History and also on our website. You'll get an email I basically take the names of everybody who registered for the lecture and I send an email with the link to the recording when it's been posted up by our web design people. It, as far as I know, will stay up indefinitely unless Raquel would like to take it down at some point. Natalie is looking for the name of the book, the exact title of the book by Joseph Toledano. She thinks it's called La Saga des Families.
No, that's another book. He wrote
Okay, then she
several
wants
books.
the names of both books.
Okay, this one I'm showing is Une histoire de famille, but he wrote another book called La Saga des Familles. And it's mostly about family from Meknes in the north center of Morocco. And they are probably very similar, but Une histoire de famille has more names and not only Meknes.
Oh, I apparently misunderstood that she was sharing the title of the book of family names. My apologies.
Okay, that's a second book.
Yes, the second book.
Okay.
Is there anybody else who has any questions, or we can wrap it up?
Let me just, I will. Oh. Okay. No other questions?
I don't think there's any other questions. I wanted to thank Raquel, first of all, for giving such a wonderful lecture. I enjoyed it very, very much.
My pleasure.
And I have, oh wait, there's somebody else. There's one more question just popped up. Oh, Natalie saying thank you. And I screenshotted the links myself because there were a couple of resources, particularly the archives in Gibraltar, that I had not thought about consulting before when patrons come with Sephardic research questions. So I was very excited about that. We have more Family History Today programs. We tentatively have a DNA talk scheduled in December. We definitely have in January, we have Shari Rabin, who wrote a book about the Jews of the American South. So she's coming to discuss Jewish genealogical resources for there. And looking forward to March of next year, we have a presentation on Prussian Poland and Jewish genealogical resources for the Prussian areas of Poland from Roger Lustig. So I wanted to thank you all for joining us, and I very much appreciate you taking the time to do this, especially with the time difference in Europe, Raquel.
Thank you. No, my pleasure.
Wonderful. I'm going to end the webinar now for everyone. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.